I think I questioned that, and it was right directly on the information I received.
Well, that will be.
Yeah, a lot of times I've seen it go both ways.
Good afternoon. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Athens City Planning Commission, February 16th, 2006. It is 2:30. We are exactly on time. We have a quorum present. There are 3 members present. Absent are Mr. Key and Mr. Kanashigi. We take sworn statements. If you plan to say anything, please stand, raise your hand, and do swear or affirm, whichever you want to do, that you're going to tell the truth.
Yes, I do.
Okay, he does too. All right. Okay. Now, our first case is /6/2, Barney and Carol Grusser. Request for a minor variance for a minor subdivision of land on Carroll Road. I read the stuff. Who wants to say something? Anybody want to talk? You can see my gray hair on TV today.
My name's Steve Pearson. I'm the zoning administrator for the city of Athens. In the packet of information that I provided to the commissioners, it's basically a history of the area in question. The subject property is on Carroll Road, and going back in time when the Oakmont area was annexed into the city, the only portion that connected it to the city was actually Carroll Road, and so the section just before Oakmont on both sides of the road was not in the city. Since then, that entire area has been annexed in. Mr. Malloy owned the biggest part of the property on the left-hand side as you were driving into Oakmont, and Scott Brooks owned quite a bit on the right-hand side. Several years ago, Dave Sturbois purchased a portion of Mr. Malloy's property, subdivided it into 4 lots, but because of the depth of the original parcel, the lots became somewhat narrow and deep, and Mr. Sturbois came in and asked for, I believe it was 4 variances for a width-to-depth ratio. And those were recommended by the Planning Commission to Council. Council subsequently approved those. What the appellant, Mr. Grusser, wants to do is buy the last of that property from Mr. Malloy and split it into 2 lots. And they'll essentially be the same size, shape, and configuration as those adjacent lots that Mr. Sturbois had subdivided not too long ago. Additionally, in the packet, there was concern about utilities. At that time, there was a 7-foot strip of land adjacent to Carroll Road that was put into the public right-of-way for utilities, for utility maintenance. Mr. Grusser has demolished a house that was there. It was in pretty bad shape, and removed a trailer that was there. The result, if the width-to-depth ratio is recommended by commission, passed by council, Mr. Grusser's intention is to build 2 homes there. One is under construction right now because he can build 1 house on that lot. The houses will comply with all zoning regulations. Mr. Sturbois needed a recommendation from the Planning Commission for a front setback variance because of the topography at the site, and that was granted by the zoning board. Mr. Grusser doesn't feel that he'll need any variances for the construction. They'll all hook up to city utilities. We have city water, city sewer, all right there at the street. Unless you've got any questions, I think that's it. What he's requesting is a width-to-depth ratio. City subdivision regulations say the depth of a lot can't be more than 3 times its width, and this is not much over. I want to say it's 3.5 as opposed to the 3 to 1, and just almost an exact duplication of what was reviewed for Mr. Sturbois several years ago.
Well, I know when we had that, I went up there and looked. I can remember. I didn't do this time, but I went when he was doing it. Like, it's an improvement, actually.
Yeah, in that same area, there were quite a few. I want to say there were 3 or 4 mobile homes before it was in the city, and a house that was in. Well, it was in such need of repair recently that Mr. Grusser just demolished it.
So the only variance that's necessary is the width to depth ratio.
That's correct. Yeah, the areas are all fine. I mean, they're fairly large lots. They drop off into a wooded ravine in the back. Essentially, the buildable area is up toward the front. And so it's not like it's, it is your backyard, but it's.
There's not a
City
problem with
woods.
front setback then.
I've spoken to Mr. Gruser about if there might be a necessity or a recommendation necessary from the commission, as you gave to Mr. Sturbois, but he doesn't believe right now that he has any problems with the setback variance. I provided him with the documents that showed that additional 7-foot strip, and we had that discussion that it was 7 feet back is where the property line was from the paved edge of Carroll Road. And so from there, you have to go back 25, it'd be 32 feet from the edge of the pavement. He believes that there's adequate room to site the house and not go, have to go too far back.
Anybody else have a question?
That whole area too, during the annexation process was zoned R1, so, it has to be R1 type uses, and that's what he's proposing, single-family residential homes. So there's no zoning problems. The intended use of the property will be those permitted in the zone.
Okay. Did you want to say anything? You don't have to. You don't have to.
Well, if you had any questions, I brought some before and after pictures.
I'm going to see before and after pictures.
I sort of remember what it was like. Well, you ready for a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we approve this request and recommend the variance for the for the width to depth ratio for the 2 lots.
Second.
Is there any other discussion? Anybody else want to say anything? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, nobody's opposed. Okay.
Thank you for bringing us a simple request. We haven't seen many.
I take her. 0509, they're not coming, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, we'll skip that.
I was telling Barney,
You
you
can
can
go.
take off if you want to sit through the rest of this fantastic meeting. Okay.
See, well, we have interesting meetings here too. Our communications from Burgess and Maple, the rest, all of them, about Campus Edge, which, if I'm reading it correctly, says they have to start over and do all these things over again. Is that what it says?
Evidently, you've got more information than I have.
Well,
This thing?
the letter to Ray Haslett from Bill Garrett. January 31st.
I sort of took it as they have to start and do stuff over again.
Well, from the standpoint of the stormwater
and
retention,
all that stuff.
the particular storage that they're talking about there was not one that Burgess and Maple had reviewed on the previous request. So it's just
They have to do it.
saying that has to be redone. And they'll just in general look at it anyway, because there is some changes to the amount of cut. It goes back to one that was abandoned earlier. So it's just from our engineers saying, because we asked them, we made the inquiry, make sure it was okay or not, and they came back and said they want to look at it.
Do they have to do
particular.
another traffic thing too?
No.
Well, that thing in the paper the other day made it sound like the worst intersection in the entire area. With the widened bridges and lanes and stuff, wouldn't that have an impact too?
Well, yeah, it was 70-something in the state, and now it's 200. So it depends upon the accidents that year, but look at it this way, we're going to get a $1.2 million grant to widen the 682, so.
I think one of the big
But
things.
that has a whole new traffic study involved.
Does it?
with
Okay,
this.
that's right.
There was an update in 2005 to the traffic study, yes.
I think the main thing related to Mr. Garrett's letter is the stormwater detention. I mean, he has basically looked at all the soils, they haven't changed, and, the cuts are close. What he hasn't seen before is an enclosed underground storage system. He's looked at above-ground storage in ponds. He's also looked at a below-ground system that had perforated tile. In other words, water could get in and out, using the soil as part of the retention, or however you want to look at it. But he's never seen a completely enclosed system. A company called Advanced Drainage Systems is the one who is designing the system. Mr. Dowdy met with them not too long ago, just I think a couple weeks ago, and they had a meeting over at the OUN. He'll more than likely present to you with that system examples of where ADS has installed the same thing in different parts of this state and all across the country, and they feel that it's a very reliable system. But again,
This is
under
the
title
perforated.
non-perforated. These will be completely enclosed pipes that will almost be like storage containers.
Uh-huh. And then what?
So they do have systems or components to them, structural components, where they're easy to clean. You don't have to worry about debris getting snagged inside of them. If you do have to get inside, a person can easily access them. Now, it would be a confined space type of thing, and if city workers entered, it'd have to be under our confined space requirements. But all in all, Mr. Dowdy believes that this is a much better system than either of the two proposed previously. Above ground ponds, you essentially just have a big dry pond with a fence around it, which to me is almost like an attractive nuisance. It gets grocery bags and things snagged in the fence, and nobody will be able to see this system. And from what Mr. Dowdy tells me, heck, I'm giving half his presentation. I didn't really mean to.
Well, I think one of my concerns about it has been you've got a capacity, and it's got a maximum capacity underground too. And most of our things are devised to do the 25-year storm event. And where else, if you have a higher than 25-year storm event, where does the water go? Is it in the parking lots, and how much can be contained, and at what point? I mean, our ordinance only require you to do X, but I want to know how the system works, so that if we have more, how do we deal with it?
Exactly. Mr. Dowdy tells me that when this is finally reviewed, that there will actually be less water running off the site than there is today. But that will have to be verified by our engineer. So in other words, there'll be less water going into Coates Run in a big heavy rain.
I thought we had to go back to the runoff when it was forested.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And that's one of the components when you calculate what's called a critical storm. And the critical storm is the number on which the retention requirement finds its baseline. And as the mayor said, normally, for some reason, it always falls into a 25-year event is what's calculated out as a critical storm. I'm not sure why that is, but that's why we send such things to Mr. Garrett and look for the bottom line.
Did I ever tell you about going to Youngstown in a development, asking the woman that was saying how nice it was? She was kind of on the bike path, and she had her bike path logo on, and we went in to look at these houses, and I said, who buys these houses? There's no work here. But anyway, she was touting that, and she said, we've actually put these tiny little lakes in. I looked at them, I said, those are your water retention ponds that you have there. Those are not little lakes you're putting in. I kept looking at them and looking at them. She was a little upset with me. She actually lived in one of the houses. I said, how can anybody live in those houses? They must have to work 2 or 3 jobs. She says, I live in them. My friend dragged me away after that.
Yes.
Come away with me. Keep her mouth shut. But they were touting these little things, and I kept looking at them. I thought, I don't know what those are. Okay, we have no other, unless somebody else has received a communication. I didn't receive any. Anybody else? Well, I did from, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Do we have announcements or other business? Next meeting will be what, 1st of
March 2nd.
March 2nd?
I won't be here.
Will anybody else not be here?
I
When?
think Harry isn't due back until about the 15th of March.
Well,
So check on Wayne's
check on
plans.
Wayne.
I'm sorry, I'll be back for the next one on the 16th, but
Well, okay, we'll have to check to see. Okay, do you want to speak on some other topic? Well, you're a citizen. Would you like to speak? You're a citizen. He is too. Okay. Minutes of January 19th and February 2nd. They were, there was just that, I only had that one word, the name of the town, I mean, the road there, that's all.
I didn't have any other
Yeah.
corrections.
I would move to approve the minutes of January 19th and February 1. Well, I wasn't there February 2nd.
Well, you can do it anyway, because I can't do
February
it.
2nd.
Well, I can move
Move
approval of both of them. and
Both
then
of them, okay.
Somebody can
I'll
say.
second it then.
Okay.
Okay, all right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, now, we don't have any other business, however, we do have our city plan. You want to go with it, take that to us?
Why don't we adjourn and go into a work session with it?
Okay,
Yeah, I'll just say on this
oh,
University Estates letter about the zoning and such for it, I will be meeting with representatives of them tomorrow.
Oh,
At
okay.
11 to explain to them the process. Steve is going to be with me so he can keep me on the straight and narrow about what, because they've got this concept that really what they have is this big planned unit development. And I'm saying, well, planned unit developments are not in the zoning code. So you can't zone it as a planned unit development. We have to do an underlying zone, and then you have to apply for a planned unit development. And then there's the other issue that only a portion of this 825 acres has been platted into subdivision. Only that one phase one that we had. And then they've got the issue, there's a golf course there, which is, I don't know what its dimensions are, if they want to replat that. So there's a few issues there that Steve and I will be reviewing with them, and just wanted you to be aware that we're doing that. But we probably need to get started on this if they can get their information to us, because they're really going to, I think, look at this as but I don't know if it has a tax implication if they look at it as they go in for a PUD for the whole thing and rezoning or platting. Well, as soon as you plat it, then that changes its tax value, right? And I think there may be some modifications they may wish to what's already platted. I don't know that yet, but I've seen different concepts and designs there, and we had some pretty big sized lots that maybe that's what we have to cover with them tomorrow.
Well, and there was
Technical aspect.
some
Either one
area
of
that
these
looked as though
welcome.
it was gonna, well, thank you. There was some area that was gonna be commercial too.
Yeah.
And whether it needs to be part of their land unit development or not, is another matter. I mean, the part that's owned by WATH, for instance.
Right,
Doesn't make sense to.
I know. And all of the residential house lots don't need to be either. I mean,
The only planning commission involvement so far has been the platting of a commercial subdivision and a residential subdivision. There were 11 lots in the commercial, up close to 682. I think it was about 60 residential lots. With the annexation petition, as soon as that's forwarded from the commissioners to the clerk of council, there's a notification that has to go out that in our local zoning ordinance, it says newly annexed lands. It used to say come in as R1. Now it says you come in and request a zoning designation. So that's what we're going to review tomorrow. That's the annexation being the first issue and getting that accomplished. The second, the zoning designation. The third, planned unit developments. That's a whole separate process. PUDs are described as permitted uses in as early as an R1 zone. So it's not a zone, it's a permitted use. Mm-hmm. Then when you have a PUD approved, the ordinance says PUD is the designation noted on the zoning map. So it essentially functions as an overlay in a completely separate process. And as the mayor mentioned, the fourth thing that may be tracking is major subdivision, because they will want to parcel off some land. So we have 4 different things running, and some are going to go very quickly, and some probably won't go quite as quickly. So,
What time are you meeting?
I think it's 11, isn't it, Steve?
yeah, 11 o'clock.
Remember I gave you that colored thing
Mm-hmm.
a couple of weeks ago, and he had some different calculations on there, whoever it is, to green space, and then he had houses in the middle of the green space, which can't do. So we have to,
Well, they had all those
Clarify.
little houses along, the things along the golf course.
right, right.
That's one of the bigger problems.
And those are not even platted land yet at this stage either. See, that's where I got into, yeah, we're probably gonna have to do some more platting of land on, because there's a clubhouse on it, and it may be all in ownership, but I don't know if these are timeshares, condos, but they're not on a public road. There's, if they were timeshares owned by the Ohio company that owns the golf course, that's one thing, because then it's multiple structures on a single lot, and we have to deal with that. So it depends upon how I've got to know exactly what their plan is, as well defined as they have it, before Steve and I can make any decisions with regard to how we're going to approach this. And it may be multiple, that we'll do zoning, probably a subdivision, probably a PUD, and probably leave some of it for future development, because I don't think he wants to plat it out the whole thing, because I do think that changes your tax status from farmland to platted residential or commercial usage.
Yeah, once you put that first structure on there, remember that's what Sol and Bloom found when they did Westfield, where they wanted to do a PUD to begin with, and then found out they would have to pay on the value of improved land for the total acreage as soon as one building was constructed, and then at the last minute it turned into a major subdivision with variances for 0 setback and front yard variances and quite a few other things. The one thing the mayor was talking about is just one of many issues we'll have to discuss, because the configurations of buildings that he's referring to are on an area that they've designated as open space or common space. And non-recreational buildings are not permitted in open space. So how
I'd get a PUD being an open space zone.
a PUD could be in any zone.
I know.
But then what you have too is the way everything is set up now, any variances that are required, in this case, a residential building where only non-residential buildings are permitted, say in an open space zone. The way the PUD regulations are written now, any variance recommended by the Planning Commission has to be approved by a supermajority of council, a 3/4 vote of council, for all variances. And another thing that makes it a little more complicated too is now the PUD regs were recently rewritten to say the most restrictive requirements apply, either PUD or zoning. So what to me should be, by definition, a PUD is supposed to be conducted under flexible standards. The ordinance is written to require the strictest standards. So there's all kinds of issues to be sorted out. I have, just so you know, the mayor and I have talked to Mr. Hunter about this before, and I actually put it in writing and sent it, sent it to Gary a couple days ago to try to figure out how to reconcile these, what seem to be contradictions, but we have to work with
It's our code.
what we have.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be pretty challenging, and there'll be a lot of discussion about process tomorrow as well as
We may
development.
break Westfield's record for
Record.
variances.
Chart, big chart. Okay,
So now, do you want me to move to adjourn?
yes, sir.
I move to adjourn. You go into a work session.
Okay, we're going to